Black is what happens when someone takes the formula for a first-person shooter and pumps it full of steroids. At least that's what they'd have you think if you watched any of the trailers and saw any of the screenshots. Truth be told, Black does stand apart from other console shooters, but it's really just your standard FPS with extra particle effects. Developed by Criterion Games for PlayStation 2 in 2006, Black's story focuses on a Special Forces soldier named Jack Keller, who's good at killing people and disobeying orders. As the game opens, Jack is being interrogated about recent events, involving a criminal organization called Seventh Wave. After what may be one of the longest unskippable credits sequence I think I've ever experienced in a video game, you get thrown into your first mission in a fictional Russian city, and begin hunting down the leader of Seventh Wave, shooting the shit out of everything that gets in your way. Truly what makes Black so different from other shooting games is the amount of carnage and mayhem that you can create from firing weapons. It runs on the renderware engine, and much in a similar vein to a game like Fear, which was released a couple of years prior, the damage weapons have on the environment is greatly exaggerated. Cars and trucks explode from a handful of bullets, walls and other surfaces seem to explode with dust and other particle effects, and the game also uses destructible environments to an extent, letting you shoot down certain walls and doors. Enemies come from practically every single direction and react accordingly to the situation, recoiling and stumbling around when under fire, or fleeing from a thrown grenade. They're animated well enough for the most part and show off some clever physics when they're killed. In terms of a PS2 game, there's really not any complaints in how the game looks and sounds. All of the weapons are modelled with a lot of detail, and there is a good dozen or so to play around with, like MAC-10s, sniper rifles, and AK-47s to name a few. My favourite gun is the Magnum, which kills most enemies in a single hit. It's a shame that it's a bit of a cock tease and you'll only get your hands on it near the end of the game, but it's a sweet gun nonetheless. I did get a bit of slowdown here and there, which kinda sucks, but I'm not sure if that was from the emulation software or the original game. But overall, for a console game, this stacks up among the best. I also found aiming with the DualShock controller to be an absolute breeze, as the aiming is super smooth and there's a mild auto-aiming system in place that helps you track moving enemies. The music is composed by Michael Giacchino, the same guy who worked on the Medal of Honor games. The soundtrack isn't as dominant as it is in the Medal of Honor games, but you do catch it every now and then, and what I hear doesn't sound too bad. There's 8 missions in total, and each mission has a main objective, which normally just consists of getting from A to B, as well as a series of secondary objectives. Completing all these side objectives also unlocks little bonuses, but I couldn't really be bothered doing that kind of stuff. The difficulty mode will largely affect these objectives, as well as the amount of damage you take from enemies. Replenishing health comes from picking up medkits dropped by enemies or by first aid kits that you can hold onto and use when needed most. They can be hard to come by at times, so you've got to be mindful of how many you have left. And when everything works, it's great fun. But you don't want to hear me talk about how great this game is, right? You want to know what's wrong with it. Well, there's not really any massive problems with this game, more so just lots of little annoyances, the type of things that really should have been ironed out in the development process. For starters, getting to the next main objective pretty much just requires you to kill every single enemy in an area before you can move on. Now this can be a little bit messed up at times, as enemies are seemingly thrown into the environment at random. You're in these huge open areas with a dozen guys shooting at you at once, and it's just overwhelming, with hits coming at you from every single side. It's like a whack-a-mole, except the board is the size of a football stadium. Often you've got to deal with snipers armed with RPGs that fire at you with pinpoint accuracy. Even when you're hidden in cover, you still seem to take damage, and that's just bullshit. The checkpoints are really spaced out too, and it can be really frustrating to get killed by an RPG from a window you couldn't even see, then have to replay the last 15 minutes all over again. These expansive levels also make the game feel so much more derivative. The missions where you're in more confined interior environments and can just let loose with a submachine gun at close range is when the game truly shines, and they needed more of this kind of thing. But sadly, I'd say that about 50% of the game takes place in these opened up, generic industrial locations where you're shooting at someone so far away that the physics and particle system just goes to waste. A lot of the time I found myself really just wanting to run and gun through everything in my way, but you just end up having to do the opposite, really slowing down and taking your time. Picking off enemies perched in windows on the other side of a level one by one just kinda kills the pace of the game. Most bad guys also seem to soak up bullets like it's nothing. You may have 80 bullets in a magazine, but you'll be using half of those to kill a single guy. The last level in the game literally throws dozens and dozens of enemies at you at once, and it just feels like a lazy way to make the game more difficult. Early on, there seems to be some sort of loose stealth system in the game as well, but usually as soon as you kill someone, everyone seems to know your exact location, so that's kind of redundant. The other things are kind of minor, but they still irk me, like the lack of a jump button. I've also had a few weird glitches with the controls, and the fact that Jack throws grenades like a goddamn pansy. At the end of the day, if you take away all the bells and whistles with the visuals, Black is pretty much a cookie-cutter shooter. But it's those moments when you're mowing down half a dozen guys with an Uzi as cars and explosive barrels ignite around you that really make the entire thing worth it. Even for what is almost a 10-year-old game, I had a lot of moments where I couldn't help but just chuckle as all hell was breaking loose, with people dying left and right as the sound of explosions reverberated in my tiny apartment. Now, this is not a perfect game, but if you just want to shoot loads of generic-looking bad guys, then this is an itch that Black can surely scratch. It's about 6 to 8 hours long, depending on whether or not you feel like taking your time and doing all the side objectives. I didn't. If you do pick it up, I recommend playing it with a PS2 emulator, which, among other things, will allow you to bypass the horrible checkpoint system by using the emulator's quick save system.